Hello everyone, I wanted to talk about the design language with Coach handbags, and I'm going to break it up into three categories: the traditional, first generational handbags, second generation of exuberant handbags, and finally the modern handbags, looking in sort of these last couple decades. Design language describes sort of the elements of design that are infused through a lot of the product, and the traditional products exclaim truth in materials. They use full-grain leather and brass hardware and were very clear in how it's used and presented it very clearly and without ornamentation. And this is sort of the era from 1941, from when they started, to about 1996 or so. So the beauty of the leather, the stitching was either color matched. They used natural colors largely. They used clean contours, maybe gently sweeping curves in places, but there was sort of an organic feel to it, but they used a lot of geometric elements in the design, and this was part of the Coach look. Now, of course, they famously had these kind of messenger bag styles with the with the tabs or the tongues that protruded down, all in full grain leather. That was kind of an obvious tell for how it was made and perhaps the provenance of it. Coming from the leather goods industry. And this was an era then that in the era that we're talking about affordable luxury items, it said these are well made and we present that which we have, and the silhouettes were kind of clear. Then we have the second generation, the exuberant generation, from about the late 90s up to 2016 or so. This is sort of the era of alternative materials and logos, kind of the disco era for Coach in a way. They added tassels, chains, a broader color palette. They worked with emblazing their double C logo on everything, and most prominently maybe is the use of nylon and non-leather materials. So the notion of truth in materials faded to something else. The prominence of the brand label, the new brand label, came into play. And it reminds me of sort of the fashion industry going from the dominance of the silhouette and the fabric in the 50s and 60s to the saturated colors and heterogeneity of the 70s, and then this sort of monotonically decreasing level of exuberance into the 80s and the 90s and so on. So this is sort of an era that was really quite different for Coach. And I can show some handbags that actually went through that era without much change, because Coach knew what their customers wanted, what paid the bills to some degree. But there were some other pressures during that time that will come into play that we'll talk about a little bit. But so the design language became quite different. And I remember during that time, I was kind of amazed, and I asked a colleague who worked there, what's going on? What's with all the logoing and this non-leather stuff? And she said it was pressure from the Asian market, or the desires of the Asian market. And I remember the first time I was in China about 30 years ago, people would wear labels on their clothes. They'd leave them on. And men would have the suit jackets with the logo or the label still stitched on the sleeve, and that was a thing. And so subtly in presenting affordable luxuries rather, like Coach, wasn't really so popular. And there was a big decline. There's a lot of competition in this era too between the players in the handbag industries, and Coach really was hit hard. And they responded in a way. So when, and they get hit hard again later too. So there's pushback on it. So, that's some of the dynamics of that era, but they tried different things, and it was really quite different. And that exuberance kind of faded. They ended up doing the New York Fashion Week in, I think, 2016, and they had new art direction, and they kind of reverted to what I call the reframed modern generation, sort of the third generation, where the design language went back to what they used to have. And they introduced the tabby messenger, and again they kind of went with, they still had color palettes, desaturated colors. They went back to the original logo in a way. They used the tongue feature, the tab and tongue or tongue feature on some of their handbags. And what they did is they tapped back into tradition. And there were some economic pressures. And maybe I'll show some numbers on that. There were some acquisitions that arose during that time that put pressure on them financially. But they also took elements of this sort of exuberant generation and included those. So they have quilting, layering now, even in this modern era. They have a broader color palette than they once had. Customization came in during that sort of second exuberant generation too. And so some flavors of that were maintained, but they went back to the roots in a way in sort of the reframed format. Let's look at some examples from the first generation, or an example. So here's a nice crossbody, all in black stitching, brass hardware. The hang tag is black that matches the leather, which they've kept through and through. It's a very practical purse, holds its shape well. This doesn't have a dowel reinforcement. The brass zipper. This is from 1986, and you see the clean geometry, the slight sweep up here of the top of the purse, but otherwise it's very rectilinear in many ways. High quality, durable, truth of materials. But then if you look at examples from the exuberant period here, they kept a lot of these design elements. So sometimes when you talk about generations or breaking things up into detail, it gets a bit presumptuous because things aren't that clear. It's not as if one generation ended and another one went forward. And that's true with a lot of things, of course. But this one is from about 2001 or 2000. So it's sort of during the exuberant era where I said the new logo and all the ornamentation, the tassels, the chains, all that. This doesn't have it. It's got nickel-plated hardware. I got this for my wife because I really like the form factor. It was unusual for Coach. Very interesting form factor, and the ivory on black is really has an interesting contrast, an unusual presentation for a summer purse. And it's got a zipper top and the same tag that color matches, but very simple profile, very geometric in a way. Did have some like we'll say functional issues because of its form factor. Things will tend to settle on the bottom, and there's no reinforcing dowel on the top or other internal structure, so it could tend to bulge a bit as you put things in it. But otherwise, a very attractive purse. But again, it was during the exuberant era, so this is humbling because it shows you how these things don't always begin and end as clearly as I mentioned. This is a backpack from 2007, so they've kept this for a long time, this style. And this has a vestige of toggle, so it's still during that exuberant era, but there's a little bit of flair there. And it's got their turnbuckle here, which is really one of the design features of Coach. These high quality turnbuckles that open and close like the messenger flap, and the tactile response is appealing, and you have a visual indicator that it is locked and you can feel it as well, so that's sort of the nice little tag on design feature. Same color match tag, and so high quality purse. And again, this is during this sort of exuberant era, so the post 2016 designs harken back to earlier times with simpler profiles, went back to the original logo, dropped, we'll say, some of the ornamentation, kept the broader color palette but with desaturated colors, embraced quilting and layering, so they did some things differently. But it is interesting how this design language kind of skipped a generation to some degree, at least for their more, I'll say, forward-thinking products, from the first traditional generation to the second exuberant generation to this modern generation of handbags. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the walk through the design language of Coach, and curious if you have any experiences with Coach that you want to share, good or bad. Thank you.